Watch out, SpaceX. You've got real competition now.
The flag that still stands has no colors.
And let's be honest, it probably won't be the last time a Starship explodes.
Good morning. How's everything up in the sky?
Hello, everybody. Welcome to TMRO. It has been a very interesting and explosive week this week in spaceflight, and there's quite a few things that we wanted to discuss this week. For obvious reasons, we won't be joined by Jamie, unfortunately, this week, but I am joined by Duh, who we haven't seen in a couple of weeks, so great to have you here. We also have Ryan Caton and Jared Head, who I'm sure we have lots of thoughts about this, so I already put out a short space pod of my initial reactions, so I'm really curious to get your guys' reactions to this and whether or not we need to be freaking out, and if this is going to be months delays, or if SpaceX once again is going to impress us by cleaning this up and turning it around really quickly. So, yeah,
Explosive.
Dutta, what are your thoughts about this?
I get what you did there.
I'm working on my dad puns. I hope you don't mind.
No, all good. It definitely a setback, but as we've seen before, it's probably not as much of a setback as people probably initially think. SpaceX is pretty good about kicking ass and figuring out what's wrong and making the next one not do that.
Yeah, that'll be something really important that we need to make sure that doesn't happen again. And it looks like that this was mainly the cause of a COPV tank basically doing a bottle rocket inside of Starship. Oh man. Jared, what are some of your thoughts about this?
Well, I figure you've got to have a little bit of perspective in what's occurring here. This is obviously a very tough year for the Starship program, to say the least. As I mentioned at Griffith in our show on Thursday, if this was baseball, Starship would be batting 0 for 4 so far this year, and that's a pretty bad night in in the grand scheme of things in baseball. And there's of course going to be a lot of people who don't like Starship, because they dislike the company, or they dislike one of the people who is integral in the founding of it, or they don't like the idea of sending humans to space. And I'm an engineer, and I know what this, that, and all the other things. And it's obviously there's a lot of people that would be celebrating something like that because they feel like this is what I've been saying for so long about Starship, and that does feel very early to call on people like that. I feel like it's important to realize that this is a serious setback. These kinds of things shouldn't be happening this deep into the program. And it's not something that you can just basically look at and say, oh, well, they just fail fast, because this is kind of an indicator that we have a program that is a bit off track and it needs to get back on itself. But also, I don't see anything from the past performances of SpaceX that say that they won't be able to do that. Bumps in the road are to be expected when you're developing extremely complex systems. It's just that for many people, we have not seen SpaceX have many bumps in the road along the way. So when a bump in the road happens for a company like SpaceX, it is, to many people, it feels like the apocalypse. It's not, I promise, it's not the apocalypse. It's not the end of the Starship program, but it definitely is an indicator that we have a problem here, right? You don't lose 4 vehicles in a row and then go, no big deal. There's a problem, but it's not a showstopper in terms of the program itself. it is a bump in the road. It is definitely not great. But again, as I mentioned, if anyone's really going to be able to handle this type of issue, I can think of two groups that are really good at doing that: JPL and SpaceX. So, and you've got one of them doing it right now.
So I would mention two things about what you just said. I still stand by my statement that SpaceX is not going to let this hold them down, and that they are really good at recovering from whatever happens. But this indicates two things. One, as a company that's what, 15 years old, 18 years old, there's still enough high turnover that there's still new enough engineers and new enough people that are doing uh crazy and big enough things to be able to make big mistakes like this late in the program, and that says something about the culture and the youngness of their staff and their engineering team. And two, this is only not a major setback because they have a lot of money backing them, and because they have a lot of runway in that funding. If it was another company, if that, say, even maybe even Blue Origin, but somebody like Rocket Lab or Firefly, where they don't have such solid funding behind them, this would be the end of their program, not to mention probably the end of their company. This is a huge setback.
Yeah, definitely.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I
And
like
I feel like that's a really good point, Detta, which is that culturally SpaceX is radically different from most other aerospace groups out there, and as to whether that contributed directly to what we're seeing this year with going 0 for 4, or if we've got something else. And Dutta, to your point too, there's something to be said about institutional knowledge at an aerospace company, which if you don't have people around for a while, you don't have institutional knowledge. You can pass down your knowledge from one group to another, but at the same time, if there's no solid base of knowledge that is consistently present through a group that has been there consistently for a while, that can also be tremendously detrimental to what you're working with as well. So it's there's a lot of factors that play in something like this, and in a failure like this, seeing the consistency of failures, you start to have to throw in the cultural elements of of a company just as much as hardware or software elements of a company as well. And I feel like a lot of people forget about those aspects. The culture in your company and what you nurture and what you develop amongst the people who work for you is oftentimes just as, if not even more important than the hardware and software that you're trying to develop.
Ryan, I definitely wanted to get some of your thoughts on this as well. You've been following the Starship program for quite some time, and we've seen a bit of the damage at Massey's. And what do you think is going to happen next from here? Do you think that there's going to be several months delays, or is this something that could have been a lot worse and that they'll be able to recover from quickly?
I think it is likely that the program will be turned around in time for a launch in a couple months' time. I think it is reasonably optimistic to say that an August launch is on the table, in my opinion, simply because this happened at a test site, and it is, kind of common sense to have a predetermined plan of what to do if you lose certain aspects of your test site. That's what a test site is designed to facilitate, right? Obviously, there is a lot of stuff that's going to have to be completely rebuilt. That would be there's some stuff that clearly can't be salvaged at this point, right? But to the points raised earlier by Dutta and Jared, this is not where we wanted the Starship program to be at this point. I think it's honest to say that, right? The Block 2 flights so far have not been following the linear path we saw with the Block 1 flights, right? We are yet to have a ship achieve a completely successful flight. The furthest a ship has gotten fully successfully so far is ship engine cutoff, and beyond that point, on the last flight, of course, it lost attitude control, which is useless for a spacecraft the size of Starship. So we clearly wanted Starship to be further along by now, but on the other side of that argument, it's an iterative development program. They're going to find speed bumps. Things are going to happen. This is nowhere near the first time a Starship has exploded. And let's be honest, it probably won't be the last time a Starship explodes. It just happened to be one of the more spectacular failure modes because of what happened, where it happened, and the time that it happened. Don't get me wrong, if this happened in the daytime, the fireball still would have been incredible, but it might have just looked a little bit less incredible. So, you know, I think there were a number of factors that came together on Thursday that led to this event looking, you know, physically being as spectacular as it was. I think there are also things SpaceX will learn from this, not only from the vehicle side, but also from the ground testing side, because there's a possibility that they might have lost control to certain things, because the methane side of the tank farm was on fire, was visibly on fire, was burning for hours after the explosion occurred. So as far as the last information I have from earlier today is that the road to Massey's is still closed to the public. There's been a few SpaceX personnel that have been allowed in, but you know, for several hours after the explosion occurred, nobody could get to the Massey's site simply because of the safety protocols. Right, things were still burning, methane was still being released. That tank farm was not in a safe condition to be approached. They've had to do a NOTMAR in the Rio Grande River because there's Starship deployed. There's Starship debris everywhere. Right, so I think there's definitely going to be learnings for SpaceX on both the vehicle side and the ground testing side, but I don't think it's going to be long before we see them testing and flying again, because it's SpaceX, for crying out loud. This is what they do.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, yeah, they are really good at recovering.
Yeah,
but
Yes.
they keep having big issues, big setbacks. Like loss of vehicle is a big thing, and for any other company, it could be the end of the program, if not the end of the company.
yeah. So far, all of the version 2 of the Starship's upper stages have not been doing so well. So it's definitely a setback. I did want to get to some comments, but this made me chuckle from Aravel. Now, instead of being 15 years ahead of everyone else, now they're just 14 years ahead of everyone else.
Now they're 14 years and 6 months ahead of everybody else. I mean, it's not going to take them long to recover from this. Like they build these ships like they're changing underwear, and they make changes to the pad and like build new pads like every other week. It's not going to take them very long. But it is a big setback in the program, and I think they need to take a careful look at why this happened, and they will, and make sure it doesn't happen again. The Lone Phoenix says, "What's a COPV?" And is that what shot out of the top of Starship? Asking for a friend. COPV is composite overwrapped pressure vessel. So basically, a small tank that they put in various locations to be able to store, say, compressed nitrogen or compressed helium, to use as a gas to be able to make up the difference in pressure that you lose when your ullage, the empty space in a tank, expands because you're draining fluid out of the tank. So you have a large vessel that stores many hundreds or even thousands of gallons, and there's a very small gap on the top, and as you drain the liquid out of that gap expands. You need to fill that gas, and you need to fill it with something inert. So for certain elements you use helium because it doesn't mix with whatever you've got in there. For others you may use nitrogen, and that retains for you the ability to maintain the pressure in that vessel, even though you're changing the volume of liquid inside of it.
so that the fuel goes where it needs to go. And as you're burning your engines, especially once you're in space, you can have that extra fuel that's left over sloshing around. But by pressurizing the tank with something like nitrogen or helium, it keeps the fuel that you want to combust, that you want to burn, down near the end where it's going into all of those pipes in order to eventually
It,
combust and give the
it
rocket
doesn't
thrust.
it doesn't keep it down. That's gravity.
Well,
Or force, momentum, movement.
yeah, force momentum. It's more, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, there's lots of, it's used for most of the stages for it, but just to try to put that in simple terms.
Yeah, and to
It's
remember too, it is made there. One of the critical elements of it is composites, which are very difficult to work with, and also composites
Let's roll the clip of that.
are kind of very, very tough to detect problems with as well. Usually you get a problem. Usually you find out about your problem with a composite part by the fact that the part breaks. So it can be a little difficult in order to find out if you have like a weak point in your composite sphere in your COPV. So
Yeah.
they're tough.
So
It's not something
John,
that
can you play the clip?
is figured out easily. So
Yeah. So unfortunate that this happened, and it's definitely gives a callback to the Amos 6 accident back in 2016, where on different SpaceX vehicle on the Falcon 9, a COPV came loose and essentially caused the same type of explosion, also during a static fire test. So. Yeah, really unfortunate. And in my opinion, I think this footage from DWise for NASA spaceflight is my favorite angle so far, anyway, of it. And just, yeah, some incredible footage that they were able to capture.
roll that back and play that again. Oh, God.
Yeah.
And the Amos 6 failure was one of two COPV-related failures with the Falcon 9, because of course we had the CRS-7 failure as well, which was actually in flight, and that was also related to COPVs. So,
yes,
technically, in terms of SpaceX vehicles, Starship has one more COPV failure left to run. So when that will happen, I'm not sure, but fingers crossed it's in a slightly, more contained scenario. But yeah, this
Absolutely right.
this type of failure, a COPV going pop, it has precedent not only within the industry but with SpaceX. They've done this before with Falcon, and it's just one of these. It's a big teething problem. Don't get me wrong, but it is a teething problem. They just need to work through with this vehicle, whilst they work to develop it. Again, it would have been nice if they figured this out, a few years ago, but nonetheless, they've figured it out now.
Yeah. Something that was a bit concerning to me that Aravel brought up was that a few weeks ago, there was a Twitter post from a former SpaceX employee about, among other things, people mishandling the COPVs. And from what I could understand from that post, it was more like the local delivery people. It wasn't necessarily that it was manufactured wrong or anything like that, but the local, delivery people who weren't, an employee of SpaceX or anything like that were the ones mishandling it. But I'm not trying to place any sort of blame or anything like that, but it's just interesting that there could be some things that are outside of SpaceX's control that might have caused this particular accident.
I understand you're not placing blame, but that points to how critical every little aspect of a rocket company is, from supply chain all the way down to engineering and even the people that make your coffee. Like there's so much detail to all of these things, and if you don't do all of it right, you're going to have failures like this. And this is true for every company, for everything that's made, for every component that goes onto that vehicle, for every pipe fitter and flange that's on the propellant farm. Like, all of that stuff matters, and it's super critical, and there is very, very, very little room for error. If you mishandle something, if you drop a shipment, if you hit a pothole in a truck, like at VO, we had an issue transporting a rocket where the transport from one place to another was not supervised. It was done by a different driver than we normally had. There was traffic on the freeway, there was construction, and as a result of all of those things and nobody communicating and giving outlines or guidelines to the driver that this was a new element that needed to be handled specially. We had damage when it arrived, and it cost us many thousands of dollars, and we had to move people to a different location and have them do emergency repairs so that it didn't the damage didn't get worse. And then once it got to its final destination, we had to ship people across internationally to be able to come and cut out a little patch and repair it and do installation. Like, it was a huge expense for something that really could have been avoided
with just a little bit of communication, or a little bit
Yeah.
more communication. Because even in that scenario, I don't see anyone necessarily at fault for that. So yeah,
I do. I'm not gonna name names, but I do.
Well, without getting into that, it wasn't Dutta though, apparently. I do think that this is an interesting comment from Ika. I like this. I think that Ika thinks that the rest of the Block 2 starships will be scrapped. Why rebuild for only 2 Block 2 launches? Push Block 3 forward. Parts will be designed and likely already ordered, if not assembly started. So that's an interesting idea, an interesting thought of to just, because, it seems like the Block 2, the version 2, whatever we're calling it, is cursed and keeps having all these problems and haven't been able to accomplish their goals. Go ahead, Ryan.
I can understand where that perspective comes from, sort of like a sunk cost fallacy perspective. It's like, why put all of this effort into rebuilding to the test site for a design which is going to be obsolete in 2 flights time? But on the other hand, they have so much stuff with the V2 Starship they haven't been able to prove yet, because of the V2 Starship's failings, that need to inform the data that will inform the upgrades they'll do for the version 3 ship. They haven't deployed any Starlink simulators. They haven't relit in the Raptor engine in space with the new plumbing. They haven't even, the big, the huge thing everyone was making a fuss about before the very first Block 2 flight, the forward flap redesign. SpaceX hasn't had an opportunity to actually test the forward flap redesign because they haven't managed to get to a controlled re-entry yet. And these things with the V2 ship, these are V2 ship things that they haven't even managed to test yet. How are you meant to build a V3 ship based on those things you haven't had the opportunity to collect data on? So I think if V2 was in a position where they had gotten to a controlled, successful soft splashdown in the Indian Ocean with a Block 2 ship, if they had done that and then suffered this anomaly, I think moving on to V3 at this point in time would make perfect sense. But in my opinion, considering they don't yet have data on the forward flaps, the in-space relight, the payload bay, and the thermal protection system, let's be honest, the new tiles that they've been testing, active cooling metallic tiles, it doesn't make sense to move on to Block 3 just yet. Also, not considering the fact that would be, a 6-month stand down from this point, which Elon wants to launch his rockets. I don't think he wants to wait that long.
Yeah, they got some bigger issues to worry about at the moment.
And we're seeing a little bit of a flyover right now on screen from Interstellar Gateway. This could have been a lot worse. I mean, obviously there's quite a bit of damage, and it looks like most of the plumbing lines leading to the static fire test site have been completely incinerated. But as I said, it could have been a lot worse. And it makes me wonder if this will necessitate SpaceX opening up a second test site to do cryogenic and static fire testing, or if they would just, fix this and repair everything here and get it operational again within a month or two. I think either could be plausible.
I think it shows the importance of having multiple launch sites, which SpaceX are currently working on. They're literally building Launch Complex 39A out for Starship right now. The Slick 37 plan that went through 2-3 weeks ago has 2 launch pads, the ability for ship and booster static fire testing. It is apparently going to have catch towers. It's going to have a huge tank. SpaceX is already thinking about this stuff. SpaceX wants multiple Starship launch sites. They just haven't gotten to the point in the program yet where they just haven't gotten to it yet. They haven't gotten around to having a multi-launch site program yet. So I agree, multiple sites would make sense, but they're working on it. They just haven't gotten to that point yet.
Yeah, just not quite there yet, but obviously, yeah, they've already thought about it as well. In any case, though, very much think that things will be able to pick back up and recover quickly. And who knows, maybe this will give a little bit more time to iron out any sort of kinks with the Ship 37 that. So that they can do all of those tests that they've been wanting to do since the beginning of Block 2. And maybe that means that we get a Block 2.5 fuller thrust version or better tile version, whatever they want to call it. But I mean, there's
Block
a chance.
2.5 strong COPV.
Yes. And then we'll get strong COPV Block 2. Who knows? But yeah, they're gonna I think that they'll be able to continue. We're gonna need a bigger moat.
Nice.
That's great.
Oh goodness.
Well, for now, without getting a more inside look at SpaceX's operations, we don't really know a whole lot of what the path from here is, and can only speculate. But is there any other thoughts or feelings that anyone wanted to share before we move on? Not necessarily. Okay.
No,
Well,
just patience.
Yeah, patience. The stuff that we've been saying a lot lately. Rocketry is hard, and space flight is hard, and they're going to do everything that they can. Meanwhile, the rest of their business is doing great. Starlink is doing amazing. Problems have been worked out with Falcon 9, and we might even be seeing a little bit more of a launch cadence with Falcon Heavy if they're little upgrades to the core part of the Falcon Heavy works. In any case, let's go ahead and move on, because it seems like the only good static fires that came out this week was from Asia. I did want to start first. Actually, no. Let's start first with Honda, because that's crazy. Did you guys see Honda's rocket test that they did?
It was so unexpected. They've been working on it for a little whiles now, but the fact that they did such a huge hop and it was success, like who a few months ago would have expected this scale of hop test from Honda of all companies? It was pretty impressive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Had Honda, so I'm going to be 100% honest here, which is I had no idea Honda was even doing anything rocketry related. Had they actually announced that they were working on this, or was this just
quiet.
oh, by the way, guys, did they pull a true a old school Blue Origin here, which it's oh, by the way, on Thursday we opened our moon base. So
basically, yeah, this was, I mean, that's what it felt like to me. That's because I even double checked, because I was I thought it was only Mitsubishi Heavy Industries that did all the rocket stuff in Japan. Maybe Honda does supplies some parts or some valves or something like that. Not sure. They might have some smaller subcontracts like that, but as far as I know, they weren't working on anything before. So the fact that they've been working on this and got this far to have a successful test that almost got to 300 meters is just crazy to me. I couldn't believe it. Completely took me by surprise. And this looks solid. I mean, the way that their landing legs come out, retract in during flight, and then come back out. They've got the grid fins. I mean, this is small. Don't get me wrong. It's only 6.3 meters high. So this is not. I mean, it's around 20 feet tall. So this is not a huge rocket. This is a small rocket. This is a lot closer to a mast in space size of rocket, but still impressive.
It's three times as tall as I am. So
this is a far cry from making motorcycle piston rings after World War II.
That as well.
Yeah. From my understanding, the division within Honda that did this was a few, I think it was, I might be completely wrong here, but off the top of my head, I think it was around 2019. And there were basically a couple of engineers within Honda that went to the management with this idea. It was hey, can we build rockets? And they were yeah, sure, go ahead. and they've just been working on this stuff ever since. And then 5 years later, they've successfully conducted a hop test, and they want to be able to launch satellites into orbit in 4 years' time. So, you know, from yeah, go ahead to launching satellites in 10 years, if they can pull that off, I don't think that would be too bad.
That's so crazy. And from
Dude.
what I could see too, I mean, Honda's own press release said that they're aiming for, you know, bigger and higher flights and to do a suborbital flight in 4 to 5 years time, which is a little bit disappointing. I believe it said 2029, but that they
mean-
would eventually scale that up to do satellite launches, just like you said. Sorry, Jared, go ahead.
I was going to say, for a company that's not exactly focused on rockets, deciding to basically say, yeah, by the end of the decade, we're going to be able to carry suborbital payloads, you know, I think I'll cut them some slack for deciding to take 4 to 5 years. You know, for a company that makes one of the most top, like I would assume a Honda Civic is like in the top 10 of most selling cars of all time. And then I would also imagine their motorcycle division is like the most motorcycles sold, period, out of anybody in the history of humanity. I think they get a pass for deciding to not go all in on their rocketry when they've got other things, you know.
And I mean, that could change based on the response that they just got. I mean, you know, if this kind of blew up to me, and not blew up in a bad way, blew up on like social media, like in
you're gonna be careful with your wording
senses.
this week, Mike.
Viral senses, yes, thank you.
Yeah, it didn't blow up in a we were testing, you know, kind of way like we've seen this week. So
getting a positive response, though, you know, some of the Honda higher ups might be like, oh. This little side project might be actually really cool for us, even in just like a PR soft power kind of way. So
absolutely.
That timetable might get sped up. I mean, a lot of people weighed in talking about how reliable Honda cars are, and I definitely am on that.
Dave brings up a really good point just by saying 2 words, which is a program that Honda does, which is the Honda Jet. So Honda's not exactly beyond or like too stuffy to try to do very wild things, right? I mean, they've also got Osimo as well, right? The human robot that goes upstairs and can run really fast. And my favorite thing, dance. So like that's pretty cool, right? So so Honda is a much, I guess in thinking about it now, Honda is a much more wide-reaching company than we give them credit for, simply because most of us just look outside, we see generic Honda Civic number 5,453,622, or that Honda Civic that your friend has that has the really big exhaust on it that makes it sound like, you know, it's moving super fast at 15 miles an hour. What did? Oh, it's
2004
my dad.
Honda Civic is still awesome. What are you talking about?
No, I'm not gonna knock it. I wanted one when I was in high school. I wanted one. I thought they were cool. I still think they're cool. I still think that's one of my favorite designs of the Honda Civic. Also, I was thinking of what my dad said too, which is that God gives his loudest exhaust to his slowest Hondas. So,
oh yeah, they do robots too.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. So look at Osimo. Don't you love? Everybody loves Osimo, right? You can't get worked out. I was just thinking, my partner too has a Honda Ruckus. So, like, you know, they do everything. What doesn't Honda do?
Yeah, basically anything with a motor, appliances, landscaping equipment.
My boss at Griffith has a Type R. So, like, that's they're all over the place.
Yeah.
So
they proved through the NSX that you can make reliable exciting.
One of my favorite cars of all time.
Yeah, so yeah, this could be a very, very good thing for the space industry. Certainly for Japan, that's for sure. But yeah.
So
because
what you're telling me?
Right now, Japan has, you know, they have Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, who work closely with JAXA. I would describe them as the Boeing to NASA, you know, in 40 years ago, that kind of relationship. And then there's the I forgot what they're called now, but there's the little small startup that are doing kind of an iterative development program from Spaceport Key, and they're the only 2 people currently launching from Japan. So, you know, Honda throwing into the
Epsilon
mix,
rocket,
which
is
would
that
be
what that
another
one's called?
big, yeah,
No, that's not
potentially.
right.
But Honda, Honda is a huge company. They might be kind of the more realistic option to compete with Mitsubishi, but we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, absolutely. So crazy though.
That's so cool.
Jared, did you have something else to say on that? Sorry, I feel like we cut you off there.
No, not at all. I just gotta mention the Honda NSX, and that's just like one of my favorite cars of all time. So, that's like that is on my like dream list of vehicles to own at some point in my life. So,
And which by the way, that was also like an offshoot project by a couple of engineers, and they're like, hey, we want to do this thing, can we? And they gave them a little bit of money to start playing with it, and they started playing with the form factor in a Honda Accord, went back when Honda Accords were the hatchback, and they made a mid-engined Honda Accord hatchback, and they're like, this is what we want, we just need to refine the body and the shape and all that. And then they got their race team inspiration and engineers to work on, like, fantastic car, and it's super reliable. It's a V6 from a minivan that they like turned up to 12 and put it in a 2-seat rocket with two different diameter wheels. Like,
that's so crazy.
Insane.
Yeah, and then they got Ayrton Senna to show up in a Hugo Boss suit in the nicest loafers you've ever seen, and just wrung it out at Suzuka.
Italian penny
Oh my
loafers.
gosh. Guys, Melanie has a prediction. Year 2085. Did you know that the Honda Civic rocket is still the most stolen vehicle in the solar system? I think you're thinking Hyundais, but definitely reliable. All right, 2085, Honda Civic rocket is the most used rocket. Watch out, SpaceX. You've got real competition now.
That's certainly a new take on the Type R moniker.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what's the warranty on a Honda Civic rocket? Is it like?
You'd be surprised how quickly you can reach 1 million miles on a rocket.
Is it? I was about to say, is it like a 6-year, six astronomical unit kind of warranty, or like how do we figure this? So.
Man, I cannot wait to talk about that for real.
You could buy the maintenance package, which will cover like 10 heat shield swaps or something like that.
Introducing our new partner, AARP, to do rocket servicing missions in space. Oh my goodness. Anyway, we're getting a little.
Do you think if I buy it through Costco, I can get like $2,000 off?
Maybe, but you got to buy it in bulk.
Yeah, Honda, what are you waiting for? You have a customer base.
Oh my goodness. Well, the only other main thing for me that was super interesting out of Asia this week. Oh, wait a minute. What's this?
Hold on. Do they have the manufacturing base to scale production? One of the largest manufacturers in the world?
They do.
Yeah.
They do.
Gonna be honest here.
And actually, I do something else that was really fascinating to me about this whole Honda thing is where they're doing this from. This is a small town called Taika Town in the Hokkaido district, which is still north of the Tanegashima Space Center. But their whole idea with that is to kind of turn this Taika Town into, a space flight hub. Essentially, they want to turn it into a Boca Chica or like a Silicon Valley for space stuff and attract other people there. And there's already other like smaller companies that do components or small thrusters or solar panels, like the smaller components like that for satellites that are already operating there in that area. So in a way, it's already like that, but they want to obviously grow bigger and become more of a thing. So we might be hearing about this place, years in the future from now, and this Japanese company is doing this out of here, and all they have to do is just take it down the street to their partners to finish up the work that they're doing on their satellite. So I just thought that was super interesting about this town that Honda is making an investment in to become a spaceflight hub for people in Japan. So just mildly interesting, but I thought it was cool.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's
And,
pretty cool.
that definitely does help with developing your manufacturing base and scaling production and things like that. So as we're seeing with what SpaceX is doing, making Starbase. I mean, I think there's other reasons they've made Starbase to basically teach themselves how to build a city, so that way they could build a city on Mars. But there's other factors that play into that, such as having a desirable place for people who want to work for you to live. So, also I think that's really interesting that it's in the Hokkaido region, which is like northern Japan. So yeah, that's sort of like the opposite of where I would have expected a spaceflight community in Japan to have been built.
Honda slave camp, SpaceX slave camp.
Excuse me, not Taika, Taiki, Taiki, in the Hokkaido region. I knew I was getting that wrong, but it was somewhere around there. Yeah, Taiki town. So super interesting. Did you guys also see that China did their
Yes.
pad abort test for their next generation vehicle, their Mengzhou vehicle? Looked like it went pretty well, actually. Here, I have it pulled up here. Let me play this for you guys. It looked like things actually went really well for this. Obviously
Yeah.
using the tractor, pull away type of system, but really good motion for everything. They got the flip down and pushing it away, and one more step towards getting this vehicle ready to actually fly. And I mean, in the case, it already has kind of done its uncrewed test flight, kind of, sort of. It was more of a actual orbital reentry test than it was testing out any other systems on board. But that's kind of the next step, is doing uncrewed test flights with this. Well, before that, they want to do an in-flight abort test like what SpaceX did in 2020. And it's unknown right now if they're going to have like a special rocket for that, kind of like what India's been doing with the Gaganyaan program, where they're essentially using one of the GSLV boosters by itself to launch their capsule into a trajectory to do an in-flight abort test. So unknown if China is going to do something like that with a somewhat more easily procurable rocket, or if they're actually waiting for the Long March 10 to even do an in-flight abort test. If they are, then it might be a little while before we see that, because apparently no idea what their actual progress is, but they're a little bit further behind for the Long March 10 than they wanted to be by this point. And even if they don't, the size for it could still fit a bunch of the other Long March rockets as well. So they don't have to wait for they don't have to wait for that particular rocket. But yeah,
Sorry,
in any case,
I didn't hear anything you said after you started playing that video. That is such a fascinating recovery train.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
Wasn't that well done?
And it all worked. Holy crap. Just like every step, just bing, bing, bing. Oh,
yeah.
Awesome.
I will never not be.
There's something.
I always, anytime I see one of these like tractor style aborts, when they do the firing of that ring of thrusters there to propulsively flip the vehicle, I'm always just fascinated by watching it. I always think of it as like my barbecue burners, going, what if I could modify those to flip something, and it just fascinates me, because like with Apollo, that was done, if I'm remembering correctly, with Apollo, it was actually done with essentially a canard that was deployed, and then it was able to maneuver the canard in order to do that. But
it was conformal plates that popped out at an angle and like cupped and scooped the air, and it was based on aerodynamics as opposed to a timed sequence of rockets firing.
Yeah.
But there's something
beautiful,
so just absolutely gorgeous about a reefed parachute just going through its little cycles and getting progressively bigger. That's a fantastic recovery train. And to have everything go right, well done.
Yeah. Great footage of it as well. So, and nice to see that footage too.
Right? Yeah, nice to actually see that. And a lot of the other tests that they've done so far with it haven't been put out to that degree. And maybe it was just because this was a bit more public, and I get the feeling that it was a lot of the other private launch companies around that were actually taking footage of this particular test, and not necessarily China itself. Although there was footage on CCTV as well, so I could be wrong about that. But what's interesting to me about Mengzhou is that it's, basing its design a lot off of Russia's Oriel spacecraft, but its goal is a lot similar to what the Orion capsule was way back in the day in the Constellation program, where it would have a low Earth orbit version that would go to the Tiangong space station, and then a souped up lunar version that wouldn't be able to carry as many astronauts, probably only 3 astronauts, maybe as many as 4 for that. And for their low Earth orbit version could carry up to 7, but would probably be less. I would assume that they would probably be 6 astronauts with room for a little bit of cargo if this is for Tiangong flights, or possibly even less, have only 3 crew members and even more cargo for a Tiangong flight. But in any case, they, like the Orion capsule, they would have those 2 different versions, which I thought was interesting. So we'll be seeing that in just a couple of years.
And it streamlines the whole human spaceflight program as well, because instead of having to operate Mengzhou and Shenzhou to fly to the moon or fly to low Earth orbit, they'll be able to have their entire human spaceflight program, low Earth orbit space station, lunar outpost, 1 crew vehicle that can do what you just, slap a few more boosters on there, maybe do a little bit more internally as well. But then you have a vehicle that can do your low Earth orbit capability and do your moon capability. It's all one vehicle. It's all one system. It all works very nice together. And it's nice to see. It's nice to see forward progress.
Absolutely. So yeah, even though they might be competing against the United States, or we're competing against them, they don't really seem to be saying anything about actually competing with the United States. I think this is a one-sided race here. Actually,
they're just doing their thing.
I'm going to be honest here. I think the attitude in China is basically, hey, we haven't done this before. They have. Like they're been there, done that. They're doing their thing, but we're just doing our thing. And then here in the United States, it's like, China,
we can't let them. We can't let them. We can't let them. It's the new space race.
Yeah. Which it's no, it's not.
Yeah.
So, we're not, this isn't 60 years ago where it's my missile's bigger than your missile, or playing nuclear war without actually having to fire the missiles at each other. Instead of the nukes, we've put people in there. So
that's the better way to do it.
That's just my perspective on it, which is that it doesn't seem like the folks involved in the actual spaceflight aspect of things here in the United States or in China actually care about the nationalistic side of everything. We're all just kind of like, hey, we're going back.
And neither do we. I mean, we're excited about this and happy to see this progress, because we like to see everyone doing stuff like this. And it's great to see this sort of progress. And even if China is the one doing this, I still, how do I explain this? It's not like taking credit, but still like feeling like a part of it, of like, you're doing this for humanity. Not necessarily for nationalistic version, even if they say that that's why they're doing it, like the Soviet Union's goals. But I count all of the Soviet Union stuff back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s as for humanity. So that's why I'm a big fan of it. Anyway,
look, there's only one country that have landed humans on the moon, but the entire world
back alive
as a population takes credit for the we.
Well, I feel like the important bit of Apollo wasn't necessarily the fact that it got Americans to the moon. It was very much what was on the plaque of the lunar modules, which is that we came here on behalf peacefully on behalf of all mankind. So, it really to me it does not define it better than that. And that's just what we're trying to do. So
yeah, exactly.
The flag that still stands has no colors.
Exactly.
At this point, yeah.
Literally and figuratively.
This week was the Paris Air Show. which, if you didn't know, it's not just an air show. There is huge aerospace industry meetings and signings and agreements and everything. You might have even seen Blue Origin was there. They signed an agreement with Luxembourg to open an office in Luxembourg. But the exploration company, who you might have heard of before, have been developing their Nix capsule for a few years at this point, and they have gotten contracts and they're working on developing a cargo version of that vehicle to resupply space stations such as the International Space Station and the vast space station Haven 2. But this week they officially unveiled for the first time their crewed version of Nix, which is sort of, I'll call it a Dragon class spacecraft. It's very, you can compare it to Dragon quite closely in terms of its size, its capacity, how much it can carry to space, how many people it can fit on board. So that's what the exploration company have been working towards for a while now. It's not exactly, groundbreaking, breaking news, because, the exploration company was founded when it was founded a few years ago. It was founded to build a crew-capable spacecraft, right? So we know this was on the radar for a little while. We knew it was on the way, but it's very exciting to actually finally see, even if it was just a mock-up of like an actual crewed Nix spacecraft, which they're going to be building and they're going to be developing, which is, as someone from a continent which has historically not been that engaged in human spaceflight, we either have to fly on Soyuz or we have to fly on American vehicles. It's nice to actually see this kind of thing take off. Pardon the pun.
Yeah, and it looks very interesting. Kind of look like the SpaceX IVA suits right there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
Very
are they?
SpaceX looking for the design too?
Aha! I see. Very interesting. Well, now I'm very excited to see what they're going to be doing, and if they are going to be able to pull this off. So should be very good.
Mm-hmm. And they're keeping their options open as well, because unlike other vehicles, this is kind of similar to Starliner. It's designed to be able to fly on pretty much anything from anywhere. So any medium heavy lift launcher, which is capable of inserting the correct amount of mass into space, and of course, assuming it's human rated, it will be able to launch this. So the exploration company doesn't have to wait on a specific launch vehicle to be ready to launch their capsule to its intended place. They can say, theoretically, this, could launch on a Falcon 9, could launch on a Vulcan, could launch on one of the medium or heavy lift launchers that's currently in development in Europe. Probably a bad example because PLD Space are working on their own crew capsule, but say the Miura Next family, that heavy lift launcher that they're currently developing to launch out of French Guiana, that would be something that this vehicle would be rated for as well. Dare I say Ariane 6? I'm not sure, but that kind of launch vehicle is what the exploration company is aiming for.
They do have another advantage over all the U.S. companies in that they use the metric system as a default.
I mean, it's just vastly superior in every single way. It's an automatic disqualification for any US spacecraft. I mean, we're top of the game here.
Oh man! Even in the case of PLD Space, it reminds me of SpaceX. Yes, they have their own vehicle, but they've been launching the Cygnus vehicle for quite some time. So, I'm sure that PLD would not mind having the extra business of launching some of the exploration companies' Nix vehicles for a while.
This is also, I think I should probably note, this was not a 2-scale mock. This was a subscale mock.
Yes.
Hence the astronauts inside being slightly smaller than the people watching on from the outside. Just to note that there.
They're going to start by exclusively launching children.
Children and small people. Oh man, what is this? A capsule for ants?
I've been really impressed with these people, though. I mean, it's made up. Their core group of founders was the group who used to work for Eads Astrium back in the day, who did all of the work on the ATV, the automated transfer vehicle that was the European vehicle that would take up cargo to the International Space Station and hasn't flown for several years. Although in a way, it's kind of still flying because its service module they made some upgrades to that, and that, if you guys didn't realize, is the service module for the Orion capsule. So its heritage still does live on a little bit in that form. But the core group who started this company were disappointed that they weren't going to fly ATV anymore or have any sort of upgraded version of it. I mean, there have been studies to even make a crude version of that, back in the 2000s. And so they started their own company and have done a couple of small scale demonstrators. Forgive me if you said this already, but one of their demonstrators might be launching later today on the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket for the Transporter 14 mission. And the whole purpose of this is to test out reentry and make sure that their technology for that is good. On their last test, which was an even smaller subscale capsule, literally like this size, you could hold it with two hands, never deployed from the Ariane 6 on its first flight. And
we don't talk about that.
Unfortunately, they didn't get the data
success,
they needed.
100% success.
Oh, that's right. It was never supposed to deploy from it. My bad. I forgot. I read that wrong. So yeah, they're making progress. And the next step after that is to start building the real vehicle, at least the cargo version, not necessarily the crewed version. That's still a ways away, but that's super cool. And they have customers for it already. Vast has a contract with them to at least have one cargo delivery mission. I believe that Axiom also has a contract with them or has recently signed up. And then there's a whole bunch of stuff that ESA wants to do with them as well. And they were even, if it's built, we're even looking at options of having them have a souped up version someday, like 10 years in the future or more, that would go to the Gateway space station if that gets built and put into lunar orbit. So they're making progress, and it's great that they already have, in a way, a backlog. Like, it doesn't have a crazy timetable, but as long as they keep moving ahead, they have some good chances to be successful, in my opinion.
Yeah. It would be quite funny if we end up in a situation where we end up with the two European modules of the Gateway in lunar orbit, with the one European spacecraft going to service it, and there's just nothing else attached to it after everything that NASA is doing is cancelled. Either way, I digress.
Well, and that's kind of leading into some other news from this week that I found was really interesting, is that Europe seems to be kind of hedging their bets and trying to make a couple of backup plans just in case Gateway never does get built, and in case all this stuff with NASA's budget ends up, messing up their human spaceflight program, that they might do a few other things. I mean, a year ago, they did a contract with Axiom to someday do astronaut missions, European Space Agency astronauts, to the Axiom station. And this week, they've signed a closer agreement with Blue Origin in tandem with Thales Alenia Space, because Thales Alenia is also building a capsule. I don't know if you guys knew this or not, but they're also building a capsule, and it's Thales Alenia and the exploration company that is in the middle of basically the European COTS program, the Commercial Orbital Transportation Services, of getting a little bit of extra funding to develop their vehicles. And it's down to those two, the exploration company and Thales Alenia. Although we've only seen a mock-up, we haven't seen any real hardware yet from Thales Alenia, but I've got confidence that they're working on it. In any case, with Thales Alenia, the European Space Agency wants to work with Blue Origin to not only send astronauts there, but to send cargo and experiments there, and maybe even provide modules for it. Because for those that have been paying attention to it for a little while, Orbital Reef was mainly having a big partnership with Sierra Nevada, or now just Sierra Space, who would provide their inflatable modules and deliver cargo, maybe crew with their Dream Chaser. But a little known part of that was that Boeing was one of their partners and was going to supply at least one rigid module, not an inflatable module, but more of the standard one that we would think of. And Boeing's space business hasn't been so great, along with the rest of their business, for a little while. So it's, in a way, this new agreement kind of tells me that Boeing isn't part of the picture anymore when it comes to Orbital Reef, or maybe he's just kind of leaving the option open if they get their stuff together. But that instead, the European Space Agency, of course, through Thales Alenia, might provide a module to that and create ISS 2.0 without NASA's help. So I don't know. I don't know about you guys, but I find this really encouraging.
It's nice to see something actually written down. I'll just, from my perspective, I'll leave it at that. It's nice to see things actually happening.
Yeah, I'll say with the recent string of bad news that has been budgetary requests and then some of the responses to that in the way that things work here in the United States, where as one of my coworkers said this week, which is that the president proposes and then Congress disposes. Well, it's very nice to see the outside world deciding to go ahead and just step up and kind of just continue on without. So
Yeah,
we'll
regardless
see.
of what happens.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
What do you think about this, Dada? Do you think that this is a nothing burger, or do you think that there's something to this? Unknown. We'll have to see. I mean, obviously, this is
Shrugs.
just the beginning stages. This is just the beginnings of paperwork, but
Yeah, and I think it's important too to remember that a lot of this is being spurred on by the fact that Europe just doesn't, or the European Space Agency just doesn't know if NASA's going to actually follow through. And then this has been a continuous problem, right? I mean, we were supposed to do a dual mission to Jupiter together simultaneously. That didn't happen. That got canceled in the early 2010s. Same thing with a Mars rover that was supposed to happen together in the early 2010s as well. That would have been operating with Perseverance in that era of this earlier in this decade. Now we're looking at the possibility of the United States pulling out of the Rosalind Franklin rover.
Yeah.
So, like,
That
why
poor
would you
rover.
want to? Why would you want to keep working with a group that keeps burning you every time you've got something? And I think it's really important to recognize that it's not NASA deciding that they want to burn the European Space Agency. It's the executive branch running them that's in charge at that time. That is then proposing, and then Congress either accepting or rejecting what's coming with that. So, yeah,
It's hard.
we'll
It's
have to see.
difficult to it's difficult to execute grand plans if you don't have reliable friends.
Yes, exactly.
yeah.
And I have to say, from my point of view, like, it's not like we don't want to work with the Americans anymore, but it's more of a, maybe it's getting to a situation now with the current administration in the White House where ESA executives are kind of thinking, well, we're not sure if we can really trust these guys anymore. They don't have a great track record in terms of doing collaborative things. Maybe it's reached the point, and ESA has reached the size and the capability where we have this, kind of private space industry starting to kind of root up in Europe. Maybe it's reached the point where we're like, okay, maybe we can do a few of these things on our own. Maybe we need to have our own homegrown capabilities where we don't have to trust our American allies. We don't have to trust our other allies. We can just do things ourselves. Maybe this isn't everything. I don't think it is everything, but pretty much since its inception, the European Space Agency's goals have been pegged to NASA's goals in some sense. The biggest of which is the Artemis program. The ESA's goals for the Artemis program are directly pegged to what NASA wants to do, right? So maybe going our own way in certain aspects in some places, especially when we're on the cusp of having multiple commercial LEO space stations. Maybe this is something which isn't that too far-fetched anymore for ESA and European companies to achieve.
Are you suggesting that you're the kid in the group project that has to make up the slack for all the rest of the idiots that aren't pulling their own
Yes,
weight?
yeah, exactly that.
Suggesting. He's got
Exactly that.
evidence.
Got
He's
it.
got proof.
I have receipts.
I see how it is. I see how it is.
I would love for Europe and the European Space Agency to have a capability of doing a lot of things themselves and taking the lead on certain programs so that they aren't beholden to whether or not NASA is going to be a good partner or not. And would for some things have it the other way around of like, hey, we're doing this mission, we're going to Mars by 2034. Who knows? I'm just throwing out random dates here. And hey, NASA, do you want to throw one of your payloads on board of it? Regardless, we're doing it. You're welcome to join us. Otherwise, it's still happening. Here's the timetable. Instead of having all of these plans that just get completely ruined by the Jacob put it nicely, the schizophrenic nature of American politics that rapidly swing every 4 to 8 years. So, yeah, I completely get that. And there's been a lot of cool programs over the years that we all
But
wish would have still happened.
But that's that's why we made the the space survey and exploration survey. Like we've been trying to come up with a way to be more consistent, to have more consistent targets and more consistent funding. But every time a new administration changes, they disregard the idea because they don't see value in it or whatever, and it's really frustrating for us as well.
Yeah. Arabelle, get in, NASA. We're going to Mars.
Yeah, there's a lot of this wasn't my idea, so we're gonna go the other way with it. So,
which I think is silly.
Yeah,
other people can have great ideas too.
It's very bizarre. So also, I feel like Grubby in the chat room does have a really good point too, which is up until this year, NASA has had bipartisan support, and it hasn't actually been that bad. So yeah, that is true. There's as a whole, it has been very rare for NASA to not have bipartisan support. So certain aspects of NASA, maybe
specific programs, sure, but
specific programs,
in general,
sure, but an agency as a whole,
NASA as a whole has had support, but inside of NASA, all the different projects are like they have wild swings,
definitely,
which doesn't do you any favors. That's not making anything. That's not making any kind of commitments.
I need that $250 million for my congressional district, not theirs over there. My district, not theirs. So we're just because you put it all, shut down that program.
Yeah, but just because you put the NASA umbrella over all of that doesn't make it better.
No,
you still have wild swings and massive indecision and a shift in priorities every 4 to 6 years. Like that doesn't solve the problem just because it's all under the NASA umbrella and there's bipartisan support. The bipartisan support should go to a project, should go to a target, should go to accomplishing a goal, and it hasn't for decades.
Well, it's good to see, once again, it's good to see the European Space Agency being like, all right, we just have to kind of figure out some things for ourselves and do a few things that won't get messed up by the different plans of NASA. And JAXA, the Japanese space agency, is in the same boat. They're kind of making similar moves, and their big rocket company, Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, has kind of thrown in their lot with Voyager Space and the Starlab program that won't even get launched until the Starship program is online and able to launch large payloads. So they might be, if they're successful, I'm not saying they won't be, but if they're able to get their private space station up, it's going to be the last one up in my prediction anyway. Then again, that company's kind of moving more towards defense type stuff anyway, so I don't even know if they're even going to be super serious about this whole Starlab program or not. But JAXA and even Canada with their MDA company that builds the Canada robotic arm at the space station, they're already looking for different uses for a Canada Arm 3, which would have gone to the Gateway station, but as I said, they're looking for different uses for it. So I think everyone's kind of being like, all right, we need to have a backup plan and make sure that we're not stuck doing nothing because of what NASA does. And I think that that's a good idea with the way things have been going in recent years.
Jared, I would expect you of all people to know through the bastardization of the design process of Space Shuttle and how all that went down that this problem is more than 50 years old.
Which one? Which
inside
problem?
of NASA. The infighting inside of NASA.
Oh, there's infighting, and that's within NASA, but that doesn't necessarily mean that at a congressional level that you end up seeing the amount of fracture that is currently occurring in the support for the agency as a whole.
That's the source of the infighting. That's the source of the infighting.
The source of the
No,
infighting.
space shuttle should be military. No, space shuttle should be exploration. No, it should be in my district. No, it should be in mine.
But that never, but that really never caused folks to say, you know what, maybe we shouldn't have NASA to begin with. It's not like we've got right now where people are looking at the agency and basically saying, get rid of it. What do we need it for? National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration? National Science Foundation? National Institutes of Health?
That's fair.
So that's what we're seeing right now. We're in unknown territory with things like that. So and seeing that also get applied to NASA, that's not really happened in NASA's history. So
no, that's fair.
We are in unknown and uncharted territory with this. So, and as to what's going to happen, I don't know. The people who make these decisions congressionally, not much of them are talking right now. So I don't want to necessarily say asleep at the wheel or too old to actually be alive, but boy, does it sure feel that way. So
on that bombshell.
Thank you so much to Dave Avery for gifting 5 Tomorrow memberships. And thank you to everyone who has signed up to become a member of the show. Thank you to everyone who has done that. By signing up, you can sign up for as little as $1 a month, and that grants you access to exclusive content, as well as our After Dark show that we do right after the live show, where we talk a little bit more about some of these topics and tell you how we really feel about things. Thank you very much to everyone for your support. We wouldn't be able to do this without you. After Dark will be right up after this, and keep on moving onwards and upwards, everybody. Really appreciate your support, and hopefully soon we'll have a lot more good news to give you next time instead of all of this doom and gloom. That's just the way it goes sometimes. So thank you for being here. We will see you guys next time. Take care.